Hi, and welcome to our final episode in the International Women's Day celebrations here at Regalix. Today, we're speaking to Ragini Das, who's the co founder of Leap Club, a network built only for women. Hi, Ragini. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi Anushri, how are you? Great to be here. So, I think first of all, I'd like to call out that I love that we're having this conversation. When we started in 2020 and we started pretty much right after COVID, not many people were having this conversation. And I think today we see a lot of communities, we see a lot of networks that are building for women. Some of them only do events, some kind of focus on upskilling. There are specific ones that are chat groups for specific industries like a women in product and so on and so forth. But I think the goal for most of the networks and most of the communities like ours, which is Leap Club, I think is to just find a safe space, to find that professional support that you don't get in the workplace usually, learn from each other, give women the right opportunities, give them access to just a sounding board, for the lack of a better word. And I think even for us at Leap Club, and Anushri, you and I were talking, right? I think we've also pivoted from being a professional network to a social professional network. So we are a paid community that is 13,000 women strong today. And why people join us is for two, three major reasons. I think one is, of course, to advance in their professional lives, right? Whether that's either via one on one networking, whether that's access to jobs, and we have jobs where we kind of make the top workplaces in the country meet the top 1% women that we have on the platform. A lot of them join us to be a part of smaller micro communities. So whether that's for shared learning, which could be like a women in product or a tech or women in DEI, or it could also be social experiences. You're new to a city, right? And you're maybe going, and we met at an event last month in Bangalore, right? So you're new to a city, you want to go and get a bite with someone, you want to go and get a drink with someone, you want to get a coffee with someone, you want to just brainstorm ideas. So I think a lot of people join for social as well as professional reasons, whatever it may look like. And yeah, that's what we're building at Leap Club. I think we've heard so much of it personally in the last 3 years that we actually have a website. It's called love.leap.club. And if you type it on your, you'll see all the screenshots. So you have women who have gotten access to opportunities, whether they're job opportunities, whether they're hiring from the platform. People have prepped for interviews. People have gotten through those interviews. People have found co-founders. I've hired half my team from Leap.club. People have made career pivots. They found podcast buddies. They found audiences for their businesses. My football group in Gurgaon is the Leap Club community. And like I said, this podcast is also via that, right? So I think we see so much of it on the daily. And I think all it takes is just making that first connect, making that first reach out, and putting yourself out there. But yeah, I would say most of my close friends in Gurgaon also are original Leap Club members back in 2020. Diversity they go through, and also the limited time they have, right? I feel the second one is the biggest reason why most people are scared to kind of, not scared, but like shy away from reaching out. But let me actually, Anshri, start by saying that networking, community, all of these are very abused words, especially I think in the last 3 years, right? But meeting new people, I think building relationships, it's just become so much more essential to one's career success. And I think in the last few years, it's also increasingly become really difficult to find the right connects, find the right platforms that will cut out the clutter, cut out the noise, and give you value for your time, not money, time. Right? People you can have real conversations with. I think for me personally, I think being a part of a community, or whether it's networking or whatever, it's literally, like I said earlier, about reaching out. It's about keeping at it. It's about making the other person understand that they should also invest that time in you, irrespective of where you grew up, what school you went to, what your family does, or any of those things, right? I think when I'm talking about women, and everything I'm saying is gender agnostic, specifically for women, I think we have enough challenges that kind of come our way when we're talking about women in the workplace, or as they're kind of joy climbing the career ladder. So whether it's, if you're negotiating your pay, or whether you're taking a sabbatical, or like me, you're quitting your job to start up, or you're doing a career pivot, right? But just like you said, hearing, knowing from people's experiences, all of that just makes it so much more easier, because you could have spent 9 months figuring it out, but you can just learn from someone's experience and do it in 3 months, right? It's still going to take 3 months, but you can just do it so much sooner. And I think one thing that people usually get wrong about networking is, you have to follow through, right? It cannot be a take. Networking is not, hi, I need this. It's about, hi, this is what I can bring to the table. Can you please help me with this, right? And I think being a part of a community for me was, is, and will always be about that. So even if it's 30 minutes in a week, I keep telling people, just take it out, because you don't know who can help you when in your life. I think just a fun fact on that, when we started Leap, for the first 10,000 members, Anushri, we've individually spoken to every single person before onboarding them. It sounds archaic when I say it today, but every single person for the first 10,000 members was individually called, spoken to, because we wanted to seed that behavior. We wanted to seed the right intent. We wanted to ensure people are not here for, oh, I need this, so let me just be a part of this community, but you're in it for the right reasons. And I think today the foundation kind of has been laid in a way where we have that givers mindset, which we feel like is the core of Leap. And yeah, so it takes effort, but I think if we do it right, it's life changing, in my opinion. So I think for context, because of what I do at Leap, I think I end up speaking to a lot of women, right? Now, these women could be people who are just starting their careers, like I'm with 2-3 years of experience. They could be people in the 6 to 12 years who face very, very different challenges. I think the 12 to 18 years, again, is a very different set. And I think 18-20 onwards is very, very different also, right? But I think just to start with, I think we need to understand that the disparity is in the first level. It's literally when you're starting your career, which loosely is called the broken rung. So for every 100 men who are hired and promoted at entry level, only 72 women, Anushri, are hired and promoted, right? Now, this number subsequently keeps decreasing as you grow up the ladder. So every time you hear and read that, oh, it's going to take 200 years, 250 years, now 300 years for women to reach the C-suite, that's the calculation that people do on the back end. For India, we're less than 8% women in leadership, right? And these numbers have unfortunately not changed since the time I have also been in the workplace, which has been a lot. But I think for me, there are 2-3 things that are the major blockers and what needs to change. I think the first and foremost, for me at least, and I've personally felt this also, is just the lack of role models. Not having enough people to look up to when you're growing the ranks. Because sure, again, fortunately, unfortunately, the only people who kind of get the limelight today are your influencers or your journalists or your actors and stuff like that. But people like you and I aren't aiming to be that, right? But who are we looking up to? Who is our role model, right? So I think that's number one. Number two is, I think, just very, very unfair playing fields. I think absolutely next to zero work-life balance. And I think this unconscious bias, which is not just in men, but also in women, right? In India, women are still the primary caregivers in most households, whether it's children, whether it's family, whether it's whatever, right? I mean, we have a network of extremely high flyers. These are people who invest in their professional growth. And even they will tell you that every time they've discussed maternity leave or anything of that sort, how it's potentially stalled their career trajectory or their growth trajectory, right? Sexual harassment, it's still so common in the workplace. But I think for me, the biggest one, which has unfortunately stopped women for the longest time, I think, is just the lack of dependable networks and not having enough sponsors at the workplace. I think I strongly believe that a network and a support is, like I said earlier, just career changing. It just changes your growth trajectory. Who you know, fortunately or unfortunately, decides what you make out of your career. And I think because of the lack of not enough women at the top, I think most of these networks until now have become all the YPOs and all of that, right? Like they've become all boys clubs with agendas that don't even discuss the kind of problems that women face on their way to leadership. Like even if you think about the high flyers, right? Like sure you'll think of Vinita, sure you'll think of Ghazal, sure you'll think of Falguni, but there are thousands and lakhs of women who are doing so well, right? And I think those stories need to be told, and I think the baggage around networking needs to be dropped. I think people need to stop doing it as a checklist task, because it's not about going to a conference and giving your card anymore. It could literally mean who you're having a coffee chat with, who you're going trekking with. If you're a freelancer, go work out of a WeWork with another founder potentially, right? So there's so much that you can do. There's so much of learning and unlearning that needs to happen in the field. But I think networking and these communities and all of that for me is just like investments. You just always hope, you wish you started sooner. And I think the days where your bosses are building your careers and all of that is long gone, right? I think it's time we shape our own. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. We're unfortunately way too grateful for our own good. You know what I mean? Like we're just like, but invested so much, so maybe it's not okay for me to ask, but just get up and ask. Right? Like I think I say this to all the girls and women who work with us also. You just have to ask, and you'll be surprised how many people are willing to help, right? Even when we started Leap, I cold wrote to lots of men and women, and I was just this person who was working at Zomato, and I'm just like, here's what I'm building, please give me half an hour of your time. And like everyone, Ankur Varagu, Suchita Salvan, all these people who are doing such great things, they were kind enough to just give me that 30-minute slot. And I think for me, I will always be grateful for that. And I mentor a lot of young founders and stuff like that, and a big part of why I do that is only because someone did that for me. So it's literally about paying it forward, for the lack of a better word. Yeah. So I think I just have one thing to say to that, Anushri. And I think for me, it's very simple. If you're in a position to help other women, just do it. Right? We need so much of that in the world, whether it's telling someone how to dress. And Indra Nui was here for a masterclass with us sometime last year, and she just said that someone took me shopping, and that changed everything for me. Right? So whether it's something that small, or if it's how to frame an email, whether it's how to give feedback, whether it's how to take feedback, it could be anything. But if you're in that position to even review a pitch deck for someone, just take out 10 minutes and do it, because it's going to, for you it might be 10 minutes, but for them it could be their next check. You know what I mean? So I just feel like, just always, more than paying it forward, just do it because someone did it for you, and most cases people have done it for you. A lot. First, let me start with, like, it changes everything. Just having that network that you can count on for advice is life changing, right? Because you're gaining perspective from people across fields. If you're a founder, you're not just talking to a founder, you're talking to someone who's potentially doing growth, someone who's potentially doing social impact, someone who's potentially doing something else, which could help you gain perspective, because you're a generalist at the end of the day, right? I was, I think just before this, I was talking to this one girl who's a founder at Cosmics, right? And I also met her at the Bangalore affair. And we were talking about ESOPs and early employees and stuff like that. And for me, thankfully, I think I've lived that journey. So for me, it's just like, yeah, it's 10 minutes. Like, let me just walk you through it. But for her, she could just save on so much of her time, bandwidth, and all of that, right? Similarly, for me, if I am at a boat where I need X done, and I just need to reach out to 2, 3 other people who've done that, for me, the road becomes so much clearer, so much easier. And I think the underlying factor here, Anushri, is the trust, right? When you're a part of a women-only community, you're okay just picking up the phone and calling, and you don't think 100 times before you're discussing either your shortcomings or your inhibitions or what you're scared to say on social. I think on most social platforms, like everyone has this facade, right? Like on LinkedIn, like I have a certain way I'm talking, or I'm a very different version of myself. So I think on these networks, people are just their authentic selves. Someone very recently posted on the Leap feed, and they were like, I think I leave my phone number here so easily. I don't know where else would I leave my phone number like this, right? And that obviously for us makes us smile from year to year. But I think the underlying factor here always is you can trust the community blindly because they're in the same boat. They may not be in the same industry or the same years of work ex or whatever, but everyone more or less is living the same life, living the same path in different ways. I sent 6 notes to so many founders who have found via the Leap community. And the best part is, first of all of us are up at that time. All of us have the bandwidth because our teams are sleeping. And I think some of the deepest conversations for us have been at that time. And I don't know if I'm going to pick up the phone or like I'm going to even send a voice note to someone I've randomly met on, say, XYZ platform or at an event where I just don't have that trust. You know what I mean? So I feel like, yeah, it's just the trust that they equally feel for it, because that's also that, right? Like you believe that a women only community will change your career trajectory, and that's why you're signing up for a Leap or a Ladies Who Lead, or like, there are multiple people who do that. So I think everyone's pretty much comes with the similar thought process, for the lack of a better word. Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and I think the first step is asking that question, right? And I also want to call out that I'm not a DEI expert, right? There are people who do this for a living, so I'm going to keep this limited to the very limited knowledge I have in the field, and but largely my learnings in the last 3 years of working with almost now 2,000 organizations. So I think I want to start off by saying few companies have their heart in the right place, but is it their number one priority to build such a network, or do they even know how to do it? Unlikely, right? Of course, we create a lot of women in XYZ company groups. I've been a part of such groups, and the intent is absolutely spot on. The intent is always right, but it needs to be driven. It needs focus. It needs to ensure that people are constantly learning. You're constantly asking them what else they want, and it's not restricted to one day workshops, right? Let me just kind of say that. Why this also breaks, Anushri, unfortunately, I think is because a company's or an organization's goals are very, very different. If I'm a part of a Dunzo or a Regalix or a Zomato or a Bain, you have 10 other things to also do and do this, right? For a network like us, this is all we do. This is most of what we do. I think if there are larger companies, like, and there are lots who do a lot, right? There's a Google, there's a Coke, there are lots of people who do this. So if you have the money, you have the bandwidth, you have the resources, they end up doing a lot of things for their female employees. But as a startup founder, I also understand that not every company has that resource, or does not have that bandwidth or that money, right? So I think that's where maybe tying up with organizations like ours becomes one answer. But if you are in a position where you can do something for women at your workplace, I think it's got to start from the leadership, right? The experience that you create for minorities in general doesn't have to be restricted to women alone, right? That is going to make or break how you are perceived as an organization. And like I said, don't restrict it to as a March only we'll do this, and like other months we don't do anything, because that's where things break. That's where people see through things, right? So you have to ensure it's an ongoing process. There are lots of, by the way, companies who do these mentoring communities really well, but the truth is, irrespective of how much you try to do it, you don't know who you're reporting to in 6 months and who will report to you who will report to you in 6 months, right? So people also always have that facade even at the workplace, right? And which is why I feel like sometimes it's okay to get out of your workplace, get out of your circle of friends also for that matter, and look for those opportunities and take your career in your own hands. From what I hear, Google does a lot of this really well. They're also rated one of the highest, and I think we have ratings of all the companies that our members kind of represent, and they are one of the highest rated. So I'm sure they do a lot of things right, but even when we speak to them, they say there are so many more things that we can do. So I think it's literally about not restricting it to 1 day, 1 month, 1 week workshops, not restricting it to women in XYZ company or so and so talks and getting a speaker and doing all of that, but really asking people what they really want and what you would want the organization to change if it is in their control. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents on this.
Ragini, thank you so much. Super insightful. Also, just absolutely love chatting with you and getting your perspective on things. Thank you so much. Hopefully, we'll do this again at some point.